the advanced camera control button is very interesting. Very divisive.
I yearn for an Apple Watch with 24 hours battery life.
Call up my friend the weekend.
Yeah, just chill with him.
Get a multi-million pound studio and then just throw in a handicap of a phone.
Yeah. Having a PS5 Pro come in is very much, okay, we've got another console before we've got GTA 6.
We talked about it way too much for everyone's ears, but the Barbie phone. Welcome back, everyone, to the 6th episode of the TechRadar Podcast. My name is Josie Watson, and I'm joined today in the studio by Rob Dunne.
Hello.
Hamish Hector.
Hello.
And we have Matt Evans joining us remotely today as well.
Hi, guys.
So the big news of today, outside, of course, of our new look studio, is that we have seen all of Apple's new devices for 2024. That's 4 new iPhones, 2 new AirPods, some new features for AirPods Pro, and of course the 10th series Apple Watch. We're going to give a quick rundown about that, but if you missed it, we also did a special episode out in Cupertino with Lance Ulanoff, who'll be very familiar to regular podcast watchers. So make sure to catch that if you want the full rundown of everything we saw. So after a quick wash up talking about Apple, we're going to move on to look at all of the phones we've seen this year, battling it out between who we think is the real winner of phone technology. Is it foldables? Is it dumb phones? Is it the flagships we've seen from all of the main suppliers? Or is it just AI phones in general? But before we get to that, we're going to pass over to Hamish Hector for this week's episode of In Case You Missed It.
Thanks, Josie. Since we last saw you, we've had so many tech events and announcement. There was Apple's Glow Up event for the iPhone 16, which also introduced us to the new AirPods Gen 4 and Apple Watch Series 10. Apple also highlighted its device's AI abilities, but there are questions on if it can keep up with Android's Gemini. We'll be talking about all of that later in the show. We've also had IFA 2024, a tech show based in Berlin, which celebrated its 100-year anniversary. We saw some pretty cool stuff during the show, including the DJI bike, the new Honor Magic V3 foldable, and the powerful new Lunar Lake chips from Intel, which look like they pack a serious punch. DJI showcased its new Neo drone, an affordable and easy-to-use flying camera that seems perfect for people with a limited drone experience. Last but certainly not least, we saw the PS5 Pro, which the announcement landing as we're recording this podcast. With a new GPU, Sony promises you will no longer need to pick between performance and high-quality graphics when playing your games. And that's everything from In Case You Missed It.
Thanks so much, Hamish. Another busy one. We were actually literally, as we're recording, just come back from IFA, haven't we?
Yeah.
Big show. What was your highlight?
I think for me, it was that Honor V3 foldable, though that might be partly because at various points during the show, I can't remember what the name of the guy was, but he's a German champion table tennis player.
Okay.
And they had him playing against attendees using the foldable phone as table tennis bats.
Stop. I missed that.
Though also, I think he'd previously played against the CEO or someone. I missed it, so I didn't really get it. But he won one of the foldables. And the guy, the presenter was sort of showcasing how durable it is and basically took the table tennis player's phone off him, was like banging it on the table and threw it on the floor and said, "Here you go, it's back." And it's just like the player just looked a little bit sort of shocked for a minute.
Yeah,
but hey,
I'm not surprised.
The phone worked well. It certainly was a decent table tennis bat. How about you? What was the best thing you saw?
I probably was most excited by the DJI Neo, actually, because I've never used a drone before. And the easiest route to market for me personally is make it small and cute. However, on a genuine note, it was super easy to use. It's palm size. The fact you can control on the back of it and set the different modes and then just literally just go with it. Really, really nice. I can imagine myself actually using something like that if I enjoyed being creative out in the wilderness and taking footage of myself, which none of those things really align with me as a home gremlin in general. But it was a super interesting thing to see. And I think they've got a lot of really exciting stuff coming as they sort of diversify the drones market a lot. Really affordable as well for a drone. Obviously, it's because it's so tiny, but it's a nice move from them. And then PlayStation 5 Pro, big news, half step towards the next generation with some iterative improvements. Hamish, what was the sort of highlights from that?
Yeah, so it was like a pretty short presentation from Sony, and actually half the time they were talking about the PS5, and they weren't even talking about the new model. But so, yeah, it basically seems like previously with the PS5 and the same for the Xbox Series X, games can choose one of two modes. Either it's performance mode, where the frame rate is at that sort of higher 60 frames per second, or it's on graphics mode, where you drop 30 frames per second, but you get way better looking visuals. The angle for the PS5 Pro seems to be you don't need to pick between those two options. You can have 60 frames per second and have the nicer looking visuals.
Nice.
So a decent improvement, but I think I think the same Matt was saying beforehand, it's more he's hoping for the new product to basically bring the original version of the PS5 down so he can sort of jump in.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm at the moment, a full price PS5 Pro and even a full price PS5 isn't a worthwhile investment to me as somebody who only tends to play console games for like a few hours a week. So to have a pre-owned PS5 and the PS5 Pro drive the market down a little bit, in order for me to pick one up and finally play games like, Baldur's Gate 3 and all the cool stuff that I've missed over the last 5 years of not having a PS5. That's going to be a game changer for me. So it's less a sense of the advancements the PS5 Pro brings, because during the presentation, I was sort of squinting at it and I said to Hamish, like, am I going mad or does this look identical? So I guess I'm not a performance junkie. I'm just looking forward to, with that slow march towards the next generation, the older generation comes down in price and makes the current gen more accessible to gamers like me, I guess.
What about you, Rob? Are you a PlayStation 5 owner?
I was, but I'm not anymore.
Oh.
So I got one way back when they were being scalped and you had to do ballots, much like Oasis tickets, to get your hands on one. And then I very quickly realized, actually, kind of my gaming PC was doing a lot of the same thing and I wasn't playing both.
Yeah.
Now, to me, like having a PS5 Pro come in is very much, okay, we've got another console before we've got GTA 6. And are we going to get another console again before we see those kind of games coming out, which really kind of validate buying them? And for me, like, there is a bit like what Matt said. The price of these consoles and the price of the games on these consoles is only going up.
Yeah. And
the more things that come into the market is going to only bring the prices down, but at the same time, we don't need them.
I was going to say, because you're looking at, what is it, $700 for a PS5 Pro?
$700, £700.
I might have seen the leak then, because it was leaked, rumoured to be a lot cheaper than that. And yes, because I have a PS5, and for $700, I'm not going to be upgrading. I mean, I'm wearing the t-shirt today. Balatro, best game of 2024. That's coming to mobile phones later this year. So, I'm definitely not screaming for higher graphics.
Well, I mean, we're going to be talking about Apple's announcements later, but we also saw a big push on gaming from them. We know that mobile gaming is coming up. Like you say, there's PC gaming still going strong, handheld gaming going super strong. And to get a half-step upgrade from PlayStation, we knew it was coming. It's not like that far afield. But I mean, you were saying before the podcast, it kind of feels like they had to wait long enough to get their stock issues still sort of in the original, right?
It does feel a little bit like that. There was always this debate about which was going to do better, and then both got hit really badly by stalking issues between sort of the new Xbox and the PS5. And now, obviously, we're getting to a point where there are a new generation of games coming in, because the likes of the Red Dead Redemptions 2s, they're kind of getting older now.
Yeah.
And while they're still very intensive on those consoles, there is a new era coming in. And PlayStation have tried their hand in the handheld market. The PlayStation Portal is there.
Yeah.
There were stock issues on that as well. And it also doesn't necessarily do as much as an MSI Claw or a Lenovo Legion Go, those kind of options.
Yeah.
But there's obviously a reason they've gone for it. And it looks like they've got ahead of Xbox for it. So if it turns out to be in their favor, $700, I won't be going near it, I have to say. I think that's not ideal, but it looks like it could be a good step for whatever comes next from PlayStation and hopefully from Sony Studios, from their own originals.
It's going to be an interesting couple of years. I mean, we're going to be talking a lot about AI today, as always. But I imagine as we start to look towards games starting to include generative AI in different ways as well, and using AI differently and more intensively than they are now, the next generation of devices, I almost feel like they're going to hold back a little bit longer to get hardware in play with the release cycles of these consoles being so much wider. So it wouldn't surprise me if this is the only PlayStation we see for a while, even with that next generation of games coming out. It's a difficult cycle they've sort of found themselves in.
I mean, you've got to think it was 12 years ago now that PS4 released?
Yeah.
So we're now only 2 consoles later than that, and it's been that long. So yeah, it's probably going to be now that this is the console, but how long will this console take to get down to a price where it becomes a household object?
Yeah.
How soon is it going to be before that is the replacement to, say, a PS4 or a PS4 Pro that people have been using for that long?
Yeah.
So
I mean, £700, $700 is like more than...
That's getting up to, a low end, but a half decent gaming laptop, gaming PC style thing, which is, it'll probably be better than that level of gaming PC, but you won't be tied to a specific platform.
Yeah.
So that is a surprise of a price.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see how it goes for them. Do make sure you check out TechRadar for all of the best where to buy information. Your most trusted source of seeing that there's nowhere available to buy it. But hopefully we will have some good information for you on that. Right. Now to get on to the main subject of this week, which is, of course, our Apple discussion. So we're going to follow Apple's running order, I think. So we'll start with the Apple Watch, we'll chat a little bit about the AirPods, and then we're going to move on to the iPhones. So, Matt, we saw the new Series 10 Apple Watch, including the largest screen ever on an Apple Watch, some new features, the premium stainless steel models being swapped out for titanium. What were the really big highlights for you as our resident wearables expert?
So the biggest highlight for me is the biggest new feature, which is kind of the entire redesign of the watch focused around that massive new screen. They advertised the screen as Apple's biggest screen ever on a wearable, bigger than the Apple Watch Ultra. But they never really told us how big it actually was. I had to go digging around on the Apple website before I found out that the Apple Watch hasn't actually changed sizes that much. It's now 46 millimeters instead of 45 millimeters. But the reason the screen is so big is that it is, they've described it as a wide angle OLED. It's kind of a new wraparound screen. So although it is the biggest in terms of sheer surface area, it's not the biggest in terms of like a flat surface. So there's potentially a kind of misnomer there. Otherwise, there's loads of cool new features coming to that redesign. It's thinner than ever. It's lighter than ever. The speaker is 30% smaller, but just as powerful. And you can actually now play media on your Apple Watch out loud in case you ever wanted to do that. It wasn't something that was on my to-do list, but sure, it's there. There was a few new features. There's breathing disturbances, which is a great new sleep apnea feature we'll get into a little bit later. New fast charging, so you can get to 80% battery capacity in just 30 minutes. And there were a couple of other new under the hood features powered by the S10 chipset and machine learning. It wasn't necessarily Apple Intelligence. That moniker hasn't come to the watch yet, but they are openly talking about using machine learning to power some of those features like activity tracking and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I kind of want to start with the redesign side of things very quickly, because I think they built up in the presentation like, we've done this huge change, you're not going to believe what it looks like. And I'm there like, it's going to be round, it might be hexagonal, like they might have gone really off the... No, it's just the screen has changed. Like you say, it's got the wraparound now. But it definitely felt like we were being built up for something really big that kind of just then landed as it's thin, and it has lots of screen display.
Still looks like an Apple Watch.
It still looks like an Apple Watch, very much so. Matt, do you have any rebuttal to that, or are you sort of along the same lines?
No, I completely agree. They haven't reinvented the wheel. Apple don't. Any change that's like a couple of millimeters here or there, they mark it as this big, bold new improvement, this exciting new, I think they called it a revolution in watchmaking. Not necessarily smartwatch manufacturing, but watchmaking as a whole, which was a big, bold claim, and not necessarily one I agree with, because when you look at the grand scheme of things, it's a bit bigger, it's a bit thinner. It does some cool new things. There's some really interesting stuff, and there's some really cool features there overall. But is it this dramatic change they're positioning it as? No, it's a slightly bigger, slightly better Apple Watch at the end of the day. And that's kind of something to be said for Apple in general. It is always iterative updates. They're just, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's always slight tweaks here and there. Over time, it adds up as to, if you compare the Apple Watch 1 with the Apple Watch Series 10, where we are now, it does look like a drastic change, but it's sort of incremental updates over a period of many, many years. The most drastic change that I've ever seen was the Apple Watch Ultra in 2022, which was genuinely a big, radical design change. And I was like, great, Apple's entering its like experimental era, but spoke too soon.
And it's interesting with the design side of things as well, right? One of the big talking points we've had is around battery. You mentioned it in our previous podcast episode. And what we've got instead of an increased battery life is thinness. How are you feeling? How emotionally with this news?
Josie, I'm feeling some kind of way about it. Let me agree that. So back in our last podcast, I said Apple was potentially likely to, or I hoped Apple was going to increase its battery life. And the reason I thought about that was because of this renewed focus on sleep, with the Vitals app coming, which is all about sleep tracking. And now this new breathing disturbances feature, which is, designed to, if you track your sleep over 30 days, it monitors you for sleep apnea, which we'll come into a bit later. But the whole thing was like, great, Apple's investing heavily into sleep. And in order to do that, the watch needs to last longer. You need to be able to wear it to bed, and then you need to be able to get up and go. And you're still, if you charge it at 9:00 at night, it's going to be, that listed 18 hours means that according to Apple, it's going to be out of juice by 5:00 the following day. So you need to find space to charge it between the hours of 9 p.m. and 5 p.m. Where they're positioning this fast charging thing, 30 minutes to 80%, is the idea that, when you get up in the morning, you can just, whack your watch on charge, or you can whack your watch on charge last thing to go to bed. It's going to be, it's going to be fine. It's going to be great. And I'm sure plenty of people do that. But I know when I've tested Apple Watches, and when people I know wear Apple Watches, they'll go to bed, or they'll go out and about with it on, and they'll wear it for longer than 18 hours. And they'll be at work or commuting or out with friends, and they'll look at their watch and they will have what is effectively a dead piece of aluminium with a black mirror on it. I'm yearn for an Apple Watch with even 24 hours battery life, because the Pixel Watch can get to 24 hours with an always on display on. The Apple Watch Ultra can get to 36 hours. And even Tim Cook mentioned with an Apple Watch Ultra, you can train with, it can last throughout an Ironman. And I'm like, well, great. But if you're running for a full day, an Apple Watch should be able to last for a full day. You shouldn't have to charge it on a daily basis. It might be my inner Garmin enthusiast talking, because when I wear a Garmin, it lasts for like 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, I think it's not the best look, considering just how much furore there has been around the battery side of things, right? Do either of you wear smartwatches regularly at all?
I'm a Garmin man. I started on Apple Watches, but to be fair, the battery life was one of those things that really kind of killed it for me. Like the idea that I can't just leave it there and track things and know it's going to do that is really something that was quite key to which one I chose. Like, I found that again with the Samsung watches as well. Like, as soon as you go towards a more fitness route with something like a Garmin, there is that reliance on battery life, which has been a bit more beneficial to me. So the fact that we're now 10 generations in with an Apple Watch and it's not changed is really unfortunate, I think.
I'm keen to move on to AirPods, because I think of all of the announcements, this is the one I've seen people with the most net positivity around. So we got the 2 new variants for the AirPods 4, one with the active noise cancelling and one without. And we're thinking that one without is probably the sort of AirPods Lite that we've heard rumoured throughout this year, coming at that more affordable price point. But with the active noise cancelling, you get the conversation awareness features, the transparency mode, adaptive audio, which is all cool. but people were most interested, I think, in the hearing health features.
Yeah, sure. So the idea is that the AirPods Pro 2 can be used as a hearing aid, which is really, really exciting. They are still waiting on FDA approval, the US Food and Drug Administration, which is kind of the medical stamp of quality. But the idea is it will come with a hearing aid feature, a mode, perhaps, which is designed to kind of do what a hearing aid does, really, amplify external noise into your ears to help people with hearing problems, which is the fact that they're waiting on FDA approval means that they're deadly serious about it. It's gone through all the necessary clinical trials in order to be classed as a hearing aid. So that's really, really exciting.
And there's also like the hearing test, so you can like chart changes in your hearing health over time as well, which is really interesting. In general, I think a lot of people are thinking about their hearing health more and more and more. I don't know about you all, but I've definitely done some damage to my ears over the years with bad headphones.
Yeah, probably.
Especially an affordable pair I bought on Amazon once, which electrocuted me in the eardrum. That's a story for a different time. But Hamish, you identified some potential pitfall/challenges with this hearing aid aspect of things, didn't you?
Yeah, and I think Carrie Marshall wrote an article about it as well for the site. And so the advertised battery life for the AirPods 4, I think it's 24 for the regular version and 30 for the souped up version, but that includes 24 hours and 30 hours specifically, but that includes the charge in the case.
Yes.
So if we go based on previous models, you probably only get about 6 hours of actually wearing them continuously, which, is not long enough for, say, a 9 to 5 working day or a family trip out. And so I think the presence of these features, particularly sort of the hearing health feature, could be very helpful for people who are maybe starting to head towards hearing aids or want to make sure they are taking better care of their health. And maybe the people who are maybe not quite ready to commit to hearing aids, because that can be a thing, it can feel like you're getting older. It can sort of be an admission of having some kind of disability can be very difficult for people. So that could be handy. But I think marketing these as a bona fide hearing aid alternative, I think the AirPods are a long way from that. I think the only real advantage they have beyond the stuff we've already talked about are the price.
Yeah.
Because I think Sony hearing aids are going to be $700, $800 or something. It's a very high price for sort of some hearing aids. I don't know too much about it, but quickly scanning through a couple of articles on it, they're not cheap devices to buy. And so AirPods, which maybe are a little bit more entry level, could be something. But yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see where these are in a few generations, but it's kind of the same with the Apple Watch. They do not last for long enough to be properly useful day to day.
Yeah, I think it's something that I think we'll see come into fruition perhaps a little bit more with the AirPods Pro 3 when that comes out. I think there'll hopefully be some advancements. Hopefully this is sort of almost like the soft launch of what is a quite complex health feature. And then lastly, but not least, the iPhone 16, the big money. 4 new iPhones, the A18 chipset, Apple Intelligence coming soon, and lots of new features. But the biggest part of the conversation, which we're going to have already talked about in Lance's podcast last week, but it's these 2 new buttons. New is a little bit of a cheeky way of explaining one of them because it's the action button we've already seen on the 15 Pro series. But the advanced camera control button is very interesting. Very divisive as well, judging by some of the comments we've seen so far on our social media. Rob, I want to sort of start off with you. Give us a little rundown of these camera features and what you're thinking with them.
Yeah, so Apple have gone about it with... They've become the first people to really take this next step with regards to camera control on the phones. Like in years gone by, we've seen with phones like the Nokia 1020 or the old Sony Xperias that camera buttons are there, and camera buttons are things that people do like for the ergonomics. But until now, we've never seen this much control outside of add-ons. So we've seen in the last couple of generations of phone from Xiaomi that there have been kits that you can buy for, say, £100, £150 that will give you that functionality and that control. But actually, to have that on the device, this is something we've not really seen till now. And it's something that given the technology that's coming in with these new phones, will probably only get better. And as long as it's done in, let's face it, Apple's way of slowly, but it will work, we'll only see these things come in with new generations and with new features in ways that people do need. So while at the minute it does look very much like it's doing the basics very well, this will probably go much further with Apple Intelligence. Same as what we're going to see with the action button. Same as we're seeing with areas to do with Siri and other apps that are already on the devices. So there's a real opportunity there outside what we're seeing from other brands. And actually, the fact that this is the first, it's not looking like we're going to see this from anyone else right now. So it's a real standpoint that Apple are now away from everyone else in a way that they haven't really done in a while. So it's a good step.
I think the third-party integrations angle is interesting. I think the one they talked about in the presentation was Snapchat, wasn't it? There's a Snapchat integration, which means you can just quickly pull up the camera and post straight to Snapchat, filter through your contacts. I don't use Snapchat anymore, but back in the old days when it first came out, I was a huge Snapchat girly. So it's nice to see the third-party side of things getting some love there. But I think my favourite response I've seen to this so far, and I feel like, Hamish, this might have just been you on an alt account, was someone commenting, I think we finally arrived at the Malibu Stacy has a new hat, which is reference to the Simpsons episode, if you have not watched it. Hamish, how do you feel about the camera button?
So I'm not quite actually at that level of it's just Malibu Stacy has a new hat. I think it is kind of interesting. I think particularly that ability to adjust through the various settings by sliding along the button rather than just pressing it, because this is something that I just do not know, because I know on Android you can use the volume button to take a picture once you're in it. Can you do the same on iPhone?
Yeah, same on iPhone at the moment.
So that functionality isn't new, but if it is pretty easy to swap between the various, camera controls, the brightness, the focal distance, all of that type of thing, then that's kind of interesting. And I think the action button, again, seems like kind of a fun addition. You were saying that you just use your one as a ringer control.
Well, yeah, it's been my ringer control since I first got my first iPhone, which was the iPhone 3G. I'm not going to change that. I could do other things with it, but I'm more likely to need my ringer control. But
I was reading about it, and you can really get into the complexity of what it can be as a shortcut, depending on the orientation of your phone, where you are, the time of day, how you press it, I think. And so there's a lot of interesting things that could do. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't want to be too much of a hater, but doesn't feel like a huge big upgrade at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a fun addition, as Rob was sort of going through, but it's not here's a reason you should buy an iPhone 16 over an iPhone 15 or iPhone 15 Pro.
The most interesting criticism I've seen of it so far are people, especially younger people who are sort of more used to taking vertical photos, saying that this button is boomer coded basically because it's more sort of ergonomically designed for horizontal. Now, I don't agree, because I think if you're holding your phone, you can still sort of swipe with it on the side, but I've not held it in my hands. I don't know for sure.
If it is, that does seem odd, because I also like sort of turning on the side, but vertical video is the main thing right now. It is.
I feel like with the Pro models, I can kind of understand that even more, because they definitely feel like they're gearing more and more towards content creators, whether they're amateur or professional, with the Pro series.
Yeah, you ready to film a music video with the iPhone 16 Pro? I'm going to be out there later today. Call up my friend The Weekend.
Yeah, just chill with
get
him.
Get a multi-million-pound studio and then just throw in a handicap with a phone.
Because of course, if you can afford that much studio space, you're going to film it on an iPhone 15. Exactly. 16. iPhone 16. I knew that. It's an interesting one. The vertical versus horizontal thing. I mean, I think that's going to kind of be, if people are really thinking of that as a problem, that's going to be something we're going to be facing for a while, if there is this generational divide between what way around you take your photos. But I do think some of the times I read those and I'm like, it's not that deep really. Like, you can still use it both ways. Yeah. It just happens to look nicely like where you would have controls on a camera.
Yeah, and you've got to think, a lot of the time when you're using it in a portrait scenario, you're not really zooming anyway. Like, if you're taking a selfie, the chances are you're either going out, which is a really quick pinch, or you're just leaving it as it is. Yeah. And if you're going the other way, then it's a motion we've done for years since people were using touchscreen phones. So it's a bit like the action button and the ringer. Like, it's just going to be reflex for the next few years until people get into the habit of, I might have a button here that will do it.
Yeah. And I think like the fact that you can still easily tap it for I've actually forgotten the name of it, the vision...
Visual intelligence?
Visual intelligence, there we go. The fact that you can easily click it for that in vertical mode shows that it is still easy to use in vertical orientation. But people be peopling and be very cross about it. I do want to talk very quickly about Apple Intelligence before we move on to sort of go through our roundup of who's the winner of 2024. Obviously, we saw most of Apple Intelligence big announcements at WWDC. And that, I don't know about you guys, kind of made this Apple event feel a bit dead.
It definitely felt drier than we've seen. There was an air of, it's kind of here and like we know what we want, but you already know this, so here's just it all again with a new phone to make it look new and fresh.
Yeah, and I don't want that to sound like there's not an excitement over Apple Intelligence. I do think that it's great they're getting some of the features that Android's already had, and it's great they're doing their own thing with their own ones.
And it's also not coming super soon, right? When is October for the US and then later for the
December, I think, for the most other markets. Yeah,
most other markets, or at the very least, most other English-speaking markets. I think some of the languages they said they didn't even have a timeline for yet were Spanish, French, and I want to say Chinese Mandarin. I think those were among the list, and again, that happens.
That's going to hit a dampener as well, though, when Gemini on Android has already got some of these features right now. And so you're not waiting so much. You're still waiting for some features, but again, it does feel very obvious that Apple is playing catch up in that area. And I think that that's not an area that Apple is afraid of being. You know, it's very much the thing of, we'll take a while to do it, but when we do it, we'll make sure it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I think with the AI side of things, it does very noticeably feel like it's lagging behind.
Yeah.
And I personally, as an Apple user, among 3 Android users, I'm not afraid of that. I think it's quite nice. My comfort zone has been in looking at Android. People have things I don't have, but then getting it on Apple and actually feeling like I can use it very intelligently as someone who's not always the most obsessed with their phone and the phone features. But it's an interesting separation for sure. And I think the ones we do know that are coming are Genmoji and Visual Intelligence. They're going to come through in the next couple of months. And then Siri won't arrive till 2025. That's probably the biggest blow of the whole thing, isn't it? Matt, I'm interested to hear from you. Obviously, you mentioned before, like, machine learning is sort of coming to the Apple devices, but they're being very careful not to call it Apple Intelligence. We've obviously not seen another Apple Watch Ultra this year. Do you have any thoughts or feelings about Apple Intelligence's role in wearable side of things going forwards?
Not necessarily wearables, because it will get there eventually. I don't need a chatbot on my Apple Watch. I think it's going to be fine. And most of the Apple Intelligence stuff I'm excited about is going to live on the phone. The idea that visual intelligence is Apple's improvement on even pre-existing, technology like Google Lens and now Circle to Search or Google Pixel. Little quality of life bits and pieces like that, I think, are going to be the biggest stuff. For me, the machine learning and the advancements that you're getting with the new chipsets on the wearable side, they're all going to be behind the scenes, and they're just going to enable what the wearables already do to be done that little bit better, that little bit more intelligently, to analyze your I hate the word personalization, because it's, I feel like it sounds like Amazon trying to identify, whether you're more likely to buy nose strips based on the echo hearing you snore. But the personalization side of things is the way to analyze your behaviors and your data and what you're giving it, and just perform that little bit better overall. I think so for me, AI on the wearable side is going to be largely behind the scenes. But we're also getting, we might also see summaries like Strava and AllTrails and other apps are offering, which it takes lots and lots of user incorporated information and it puts little summaries on the top. So you'll get a summary of your week in running from Strava, or a summary of all the comments on an AllTrails route, which says this is super, which is all the users say this route is really, really good, but are likely to be very flooded in the wintertime. So bring Wellington boots. I don't know what the equivalent of Wellington boots is for our US audience, but I guess
that's a great question. What do they call them?
Yeah, but so for me, I'm not like all the intelligent stuff is already happening behind the scenes at Apple from the wearable side, and Apple Intelligence as a concept is more likely to be used on phones and Macs and the kind of places you're going to be writing and creating and asking it what things are and taking photos and, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think on that final note, it does seem to be interesting that Apple has lent very hard on perhaps the things that feel most familiar, like effectively enhanced autocorrect. And things that are safe feeling. And I think, like you say, Matt, it will be the same as and when we see it roll out across other devices. It's all going to be focused on the things that I think Apple thinks people can and will use it for, rather than what, a very advanced user could use it for if they so chose. We should move on to the meat and potatoes of today's discussion, which is we've seen all of this year's flagships. The major trends have been foldables, AI, dumb phones, quite a lot of creator-focused tools, and smartwatches continuing to go through their strengths. So I wanted to just open the floor, really, and have a chat on who we think has been the real winners this year. Is it the sort of traditional smartphones that we've seen from the Galaxy S24, iPhone 16? So Hamish, I want to start with you first. We've seen you go on a journey throughout this podcast, a journey of learning to love foldables, not flip phones, but foldables. What do you think is the real win of this year? Is it foldables or...
I think if you're looking for something that is new and different compared to what's on the market, we're just talking about how the iPhone 16 doesn't feel that different. Going for a foldable does deliver on that because obviously the flip phone, as we said, I'm not a big fan of them. If you want your long phone, you can have it. It's interesting, obviously, with that design difference. And then obviously the more fold phones, which are like tablets that you can slip into your pocket. They're fantastic for so many different use cases. Downside is they are pricey, and I think that's going to hold them back for a few years. But if you do feel like your regular phones from Samsung or Google or Apple just aren't scratching that itch for something innovative anymore, I think look at foldables because they could be that thing that you're missing and that you're after.
And you've tried the Samsung Galaxy Fold
Z
Fold 6. Have you tried any others that you would recommend?
I've not tried any others. I really want to give the Pixel 9 Pro Fold a go. Again, so many nouns back to back. I really want to give that a go, particularly because that is slightly larger and it feels like two Pixel 9s next to each other, whereas the Galaxy Z Fold 6 is slightly smaller than two S24s together. It's fine overall, but sometimes, particularly when it's folded down, so you've just got the single front screen, it does feel a little slimmer. Some apps are cut off slightly at the edge, which can be somewhat frustrating. Though on the flip side, that has an IP48 dust and waterproof rating. So 8 means that it's waterproof, which is the same as pretty much any other phone on the market right now. The 4 is dustproofness. That means it can keep out things that are bigger than 1 millimeter, which is still not that small. Yeah. Most phones can do 6, but when in the world of foldables, that 4 rating, I think is the best there is out there right now. Okay. At least I think there's one that might do better, but then it's got like a 2 for waterproof rating. So if you're after sort of the best of both, that's Samsung. Though again, there's that fear. If you take your $1,900 phone to the beach, it's going to get sand in it. It's going to get ruined. Yeah. Unless you've got money to burn, that's not something you really want to do. So it swings and roundabouts. But I think from the design innovation, foldables are really awesome right now.
I've been trying this Motorola Razr 50 and it's a flip phone. Don't look at me, Hamish. And that is interesting to me as someone who's never used an Android phone, went straight from dumb phones to Apple. It's been a journey relearning how to use a phone, basically, from scratch. I think, actually, in my perspective, This has really been the year of the dumb phones. I'm throwing it out there. We saw early in the year a big trend of rejection of phones by Gen Zs or rather aging Gen Zs, as those of us later in the demographic are called. And it's kind of only been cemented by this big AI push, this big push for phones to be more expensive, more feature-driven, more of everything. I've had a really nice time taking a break with dumb phones. It does give some degree of anxiety, but I think I'd be kind of happy to have like a dumb phone and an older generation phone that can do the social media bits just for when I need it, but the dumb phone be my main.
Yeah, I think it's been a year of that kind of thing. You know, you look at the success of things like Remarkable, where you take a tablet and go, hey, we're not a tablet anymore. We are just paper. Like, that kind of concept is really coming back. And there is that drive for people to be like, I don't want to be on social media anymore. And whether that's from, you know, the controversy with X or just people wanting to move away from being online all the time, it's really kind of changing. And while we're not seeing maybe as many of those kind of simplified phones as we like, the ones that are coming out are really kind of interesting and grabbing that audience who want that. So it's hopefully something we'll see more of. I just don't know why.
So because we talked about IFA 2024 in case you missed it, and don't know if you saw it there, Josie, but there was the TCL Next Paper 50 Pro. And that is a dumb phone and a smartphone with a slider, so you can swap between the two versions. And that could be, I think, a very good entryway for people who want the dumb phone experience, but aren't yet ready to commit to not having a smartphone, because smartphones are just very sort of overpowered in terms of the assistance they offer you in your day-to-day. Yeah. And so this sort of has the best of both.
I can kind of see phones going back to being like very messaging and camera focused. So things like WhatsApp still having a place in the world, things potentially even like Messenger having a place. But I don't know about you guys. I don't remember the last time I opened Facebook on my phone. That's probably a given for most people. X, okay, also a given maybe. But any social media app apart from TikTok maybe doesn't really get opened on my phone anymore. Is it the same for you, or are you still?
I mean, I'm not someone on the TikTok trend. I left at Vine. No. When Vine died, I died with it on that front. I've not doom scrolled in many a day. But no, I think thank you. I think there's going to be a lot more of that with just the amount going on. I think that people were looking at phones now and seeing 20, 30, 40 notifications on their phone and going, oh my goodness, I don't want to see this anymore. Yeah. And there's, you know, the fact of the improvements with like personal do not disturb modes and having the ability to just disconnect from that, you know, like with what TCL have done, there is a push for it. And yeah, I like it. It seems like people are going backwards, but in a good way. So,
and we were talking earlier as well about, you know, tech that has personality as well, tech that sort of reflects something in you. And I think with dumb phones especially, you're seeing a lot more of that. How many comments have I seen on every flagship phone that we've covered this year with people saying, well, it looks the same as X, whether that's from the same brand or another brand. I think when you start looking back at the dumb phone market, you do see some more of that quirkiness coming through. You do see some of that more original design. I mean, even I probably talked about it way too much for everyone's ears, but the Barbie phone, the Barbie flip phone by HMD is just brilliant because it comes with little phone charms. You can customize it. There's a mirror on the outside, which is not the most flattering mirror in the world, I'll be honest. But like everything else about it is so fun. And obviously it's a collaboration phone. It's a bit gimmicky, but it's hearkening back to those days where you would get a phone, you would show it to people and they would not have seen that specific phone before. They would not know the specific features in it, and it was exciting. And I like that.
And also no one would have thought, oh, but that's no different to the last one.
Yes.
You wouldn't have looked at your Nokia and gone, that looks the same as this phone. There was such variety, and it was also just an era of random phones doing many things. Like, when do you see little 8-bit games on phones now that are just absolutely useless, but you'll be addicted to for hours?
Yeah, not without trawling through Apple to find something that isn't Monopoly Go.
Or having to watch an advert between every play.
Don't get started. And Matt, when it comes to sort of looking at how wearables are sort of transitioning into their own thing, not so much being just sort of ridden as a companion device for a phone now, where do you see wearables going with this next year, and what do you think has been the real win this year?
So I think the biggest change that has been a real winner this year was the Samsung Galaxy Ring. We were talking about it for absolutely ages before it came out. It is the biggest departure from the typical smartwatch from any of the big players that I've seen in a very, very long time. It takes some of that same health monitoring architecture, and it has distilled it to its essence for people like you guys were saying just now. I don't who wants notifications and apps and everything else on your wrist? Who wants another Black Mirror? So it's like, well, here's all the health monitoring benefits, or most of them, because it doesn't have like GPS and stuff. If you're a dedicated runner, you're always going to go for a watch over something like that. But if you're just after the sort of holistic health monitoring benefits, like the Samsung Galaxy Ring and the Oura Ring, here is that without having to have another screen on your wrist. No flashing badges saying you've walked 5,000 steps. Good job. Here's a speck of dopamine. Here's, any of that kind of thing. It is a passive wear and forget monitoring device. And I think we'll start to see a juxtaposition between these two, because I think you guys are right. I think there is a shift coming away from the way the algorithms and phones and devices have kind of tried to get us in this kind of consumer capitalist hellscape of notifications and adverts and personalization. But the more the manufacturers and kind of guys behind this sense a shift away from that, the more addictive they're going to try and make, especially in terms of apps, right? Especially in terms of mobile gaming, all that kind of thing. They're going to try and keep hold of our attention for as long as possible with like aggressive TikTok based algorithms. And because I think there is a shift coming, but there will be a tipping point between those who can break away and people who have been 12, 13, possibly younger when TikTok came out, and have been kind of shaped by these algorithms in a way that we, as people who were I can't speak for you guys. I'm 32. I had a MySpace account. And where by the time I got into Facebook, and by the time you had Instagram, and by the time Instagram turned into Reels with TikTok and everything, I was already in my late 20s. But the teenagers growing up with this will not have that separation. And I think devices like Hamish mentioned, a slidey phone to put it back into a remarkable type paper mode. I think that's genius. I think that's great, because you've still got a powerful device, but you have the option to sort of, break away from that. Sorry, that was a very meandering answer, and not much of it was focused around wearables, so I don't know how helpful that was.
That's perfect.
So, Matt, how long, though, do you think it's going to be before someone makes a smart ring with a display on it?
Oh, no.
Oh.
That quietest whisper from Rob there. That was brilliant.
You know what I think we will get before one with a display? I think we'll get haptic feedback that will vibrate when you have a notification, but you have to check your phone in order to get that notification. I think that's what we'll get first.
I want a Tamagotchi smart ring with a little pet on it. That's what I want. I think that might be the third time I've suggested that a random piece of tech puts Tamagotchi on it in this podcast.
Constantly have a little thing to
that is the only display I want on there, is a little Tamagotchi, and based on my vitals, it has little reactions. That's what I want.
So
I don't want
sugar, and then
a smart ring is like that, Josie, but rather than having a Tamagotchi, you are the Tamagotchi. It reminds you to drink water.
But I need a visual representation that looks much cuter than I do to explain to me how I'm feeling. But sorry, you had a good. You're answering a good question from Hamish before I derailed it to talk about Tamagotchi again.
Right, sorry. All I can think about now is Tamagotchi. What was the question?
That's going to have to go to the outtakes.
No, I think it will be connected to vitals, because we're seeing Apple having a lot of success with the atrial fibrillation alerts, crash detection, those kind of things where it will notify you if there's an emergency situation happening, we had TechRadar's own Lucy Bruglas wrote a feature on how the heart health notifications feature potentially saved her boyfriend's life. And it's a fantastic tool. So I think if you've got the ability to scan and monitor for those haptic feedback with a little buzz or a light, or perhaps we'll get a light more sooner than we'll get haptic feedback, some way to alert you to say, check your phone, something is happening, may well be the answer there. But I think that infrastructure will be put in place with those medical features in mind, saying, wake up, you've got, my immediate thought was like, wake up, babe, new feature just dropped. There's an alert here, your heart rate is irregular, you need to go to the hospital. But I think once that feature's in place, it will then be co-opted by the idea that you can opt into notifications. So it won't be long before, you've got a new WhatsApp message and then we all turn off again.
Well, I think that is all we have time for in today's episode. But make sure to check out techradar.com for all of our hands-ons with the new Apple devices, and also our YouTube and TikTok channel, where we've given you all of the latest information on what's come out from Apple. And with that, I think we'll be seeing you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.